So we go again, number 71, the Darkness Light Godcast. Welcome back with myself, Jim McFadyen from the Vortex Centre for Wellbeing. And it's been a wee while. It's probably been the best part of maybe not quite a month. The last one was just after my birthday. I think I was talking about birthday gifts. So the intention is to put them out every week. Unfortunately, over the last wee bit, it's been a wee bit bumpy to say the least. It's been very much a lot of adversity. There's been a lot of challenges on many different levels. And as always, when you've got nothing to say or you're not in a position to say it, then you know I remember the quote for Jim Rohn spoke about JFK's dad, and he said if it's not necessary to speak, it's necessary not to speak. And I always loved that, you know, the kind of always trying to keep it, you know, be brief, brevity, you know, and you know the points that I'm making or trying to make. It comes off the back of the work that I'm doing. So, you know, when the wheels come off, as they have, you know, over the last probably 3-4 weeks, in one way, shape or form, a lot of kind of personal stuff going on. It's been a really difficult time. And at that point, you know, you really kind of need to stop on almost every front and tend to the stuff that's important to you, you know, the stuff that really matters. This work's fantastic and I love it, and my desire is to help as many people as I can always. But sometimes you're just not in a position where you can actually do that, and that's been the case for the last, you know, at least 2 or 3 weeks. So, you know, today, getting back into it, I felt the desire to go again. The sun's been shining all day, we've got a wee bit of winter sun. And I thought I'd maybe catch the end of the sun. It's just starting to get down in the background, so kind of missed that in the natural light within the room. We just need to see how we go. But this came off the back of, I've been thinking this for a long time, it came off the back of Thanksgiving. Really Thanksgiving, which is, what date is that in November? Is it the 28th of November? And then Black Friday was the following day. And that was us, you know, right in the middle of, you know, the kind of the adversity we were facing. And Thanksgiving's always an interesting one for me, you know, that date and how it's celebrated across, especially in America. I think it's their biggest holiday, isn't it? You know, for, you know, what you would class as kind of, what even is a normal American anymore, but certainly the Americans that I've known, you hear them talking about whether it's Christmas or Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's the big one, and it always feels like a fantastic you know, celebration, you know, giving thanks. How many times do I talk about gratitude? Maybe not as much on here, but every single time I take, you know, whether it's a class or a group or an individual through the breathwork, you know, it's always about reconnecting and remembering, you know, that which you're grateful for, those you're grateful for, but the stuff you're grateful for, and, you know, really giving thanks. And gratitude is something that changed my life. The first time I really experienced it was 1998 would have been, when Anthony Robbins down in London, I was probably about a year into my journey. And during an eyes closed, I think we're standing process, he basically asked you to go in and to, you know, to give thanks, you know, who you're grateful for. And it broke me in two, it really did, because at the time I was just going out the back of massive adversity that almost cost me my life. And at the time, you know, the realisation of what my mum and my dad and my girl and my brother had done for me, which literally saved my life. And, you know, during that process with Robbins, you know, the realisation that I'd never really kind of truly thanked him. First time I was really out the other side, and probably starting to be in a position where I could look back a wee bit and see what I'd just been through. And so to, you know, be in London, surrounded with 10,000 people and just breaking my heart, literally breaking my heart with tears of gratitude, it was really powerful, something that changed my life in many, many ways. And, you know, gratitude is something that obviously is something that is so powerful in so many different ways, you know, the emotion, the, you know, the recognition of it, and, you know, identifying what it is you're grateful for, and then obviously most significantly, which I've been going through a lot just now, the ones that I'm grateful for, you know, the ones that mean the most to me, the ones in this life that, you know, that I'm truly thankful for in so many different ways. Very, very powerful emotion. So the holiday itself, you know, you think of Thanksgiving, and you look at the Americans and how much it's celebrated. It's not as much, if at all, in this country. But obviously because of the way the world just now, and, you know, there's not really any barriers anymore because of social media and the internet. So, you know, when they're celebrating Thanksgiving, then obviously we're going to see it. And for quite a few years now, as with everything, probably when I started to see through the veils and started to question everything, Thanksgiving was one of the things that I really looked into. In terms of, you know, where did it come from? What's the origin of it? And you just need to go online and you see very quickly there's absolutely two sides to it. It's really about the kind of start of the 1620, when the pilgrims made their way across the Atlantic and landed in America. And they talk about the Thanksgiving of being a gift where they met the natives, which we would have known as Indians, Native American Indians, which are really just the Americans. If that land is going to be called America, or whatever it was called back then, but the natives to that land that had been there forever. You think America's only, what the best part of what 400 years old? Is it 400 years old? Even 400 years old? Again, dates and history is not really my strong point. I did look it up when I was thinking about this at the time, when I started thinking about Thanksgiving. But to think, that America, how far it goes back beyond that, and the history that we don't really know much about, and when you look in and you start to tune into, Native Americans and their history and the stories that they tell, then it's a very, very different, story than the one that we've been sold, in terms of giving thanks and being grateful, and everybody sitting and running about the table, and which is great. Obviously, that's a great way, and it's a great thing to do. But as always, the truth that sets us free, and the celebration, of what the Americans, which would be, when you think of them, it's really the white America. The Brits started it, and the Europeans going over, and then what they did to that people. Talking about devastation. They reckon up to possibly over 100 million people were done away with in one way, shape or form, whether it was through war and conflict, whether it was through, land loss, through the colonisation, I'll get that out. The colonisation that took place, the disease that they brought, and obviously the natives didn't have any immunity to the diseases, and then as always with the white man, it seems to be the broken promises and the deals that were made, and then you get to a point where almost wiping out an entire race of people. So you're looking at a genocide, possibly the biggest genocide there's ever been. And the history that we are taught, and the history that we know about, there's very little of that mentioned, and even growing up, when you think of the cowboy and Indian films, how the Indians were always portrayed as savages. That was the word, savages, and you're always cheering on the cowboys, killing the Indians, and the Indians on their horses with their bows and their arrows, and the cowboys with their Winchester rifles, the kind of the loading rifles, and not really the fairest of fights. So the betrayal that took place, the promises that were broken, what they did, to the native people. Native Americans now, they recognise that day as a day of mourning, and a day of loss, and a day where it started to go in a direction that they could probably never have foreseen, when they actually welcomed the pilgrims off their boats, and shared with them what they knew in terms of how to work the land, and how to live off the land, and all that kind of good stuff. And then human nature, man, greed gets in the way, and before you know it, then they're done away with. So holy days in this Godcast, it's really, again, it's a wee bit of truth. And for me, getting into Christmas, which has always been a challenge for me since I've been a young, I tell a story about when I was a young guy and asking the local, the parish priest, questioning Christmas, and I was probably primary 6 or primary 7 at the time. I was still serving on the altar, I was still an altar boy. I remember the priest, Father McCarthy, and I remember him looking at me when I was questioning about it, in terms of, and that was back then before the internet, I was very aware of the pressure that it was putting on probably certain people within that I knew within my class, and obviously hearing it through my mum and my dad, who always gave us a very balanced side. We were blessed in terms of mum and dad. Christmas was always a great time of year, presents and excess, the meal, the holidays. It was a time of great celebration, getting your toys, and a time of just great happiness and being together, a great family time. Some fantastic memories of Christmas growing up. But then as you start to get older and you start to look at, what it is you're meant to be celebrating. I mean older, I was probably not even into high school at this point. And, baby Jesus, the birthday of Jesus, and, how it was meant to be Jesus' birthday and all that kind of good stuff. And just always feeling that something wasn't quite right. And again, the celebration of holy days, Thanksgiving being one of them. And then how it feeds into, this time of year for, most of the Western world, where we celebrate Christmas. And then when you see how far Christmas has fallen, from certainly the ideology that I was taught in terms of what it's supposed to be. And then again, when you go in and you look at, the origin of it. Before I talk about Christmas, Thanksgiving was right before Black Friday. Black Friday is another one, and this is where you start to see, what we've been fed and what we've been taught and what we've been programmed, what we've been basically brainwashed into believing through, the whether it's the news when you're growing up or whether it's now it's social media. The stuff that we're taught. Black Friday, I can't even remember when that came in. It's certainly within the last 10, 15 years. Black Friday became a thing. And I had a wee look for that. I remember driving, I was going to Glasgow on the Thursday. And I remember seeing the queue into one of the shopping centres just coming off the motorway in Glasgow. It was 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, heading into Glasgow. This was right in the middle of it when I was in the middle of the kind of pain and the suffering. And seeing this queue get into, I think it's the Fort, this side of Glasgow. And, just seeing the people as I drove by, this queue was must have been half a mile back off the motorway, and then feeding up and getting into this big shopping centre. And not really realising what it was at the time, and then realising when I got to where I was going that, all right, Black Friday, I saw an advert in one of the kind of electronic screens, it was Black Friday was the next day. And then fast forward to the next day when I was actually getting into that same place, it was a wee bit later, I was jumping in to grab some food, and just seeing people walking about and just in this hypnotic trance. I've just, I think of Fight Club all the time, buying shit you don't need. Just this consumerism of just this never-ending, almost an unconscious programmed. It's like a program. It's a literal program of just the need to go and get stuff, and then obviously because it's Black Friday, there's discounts on, so the frenzy has begun. So it's not even into December yet, and you're already, spending your money and stuff. To the idea of saving money before you get to Christmas. And then I looked up Black Friday and where it came from. And black obviously means profit. When with all this stuff, it was a conglomeration of businesses, probably a consortium of those that own the big business, and decided they would have this day where they all came together to take your money basically, so that they could get into the black, so that they could make a profit. And as always, where there's a profit, then there's always a loss. And watching people just in this state, this frenzied state, when I was in that shopping centre that day, and again, just another made-up event, a made-up kind of, it's not a holiday, it's a celebration of commercialism, a celebration of capitalism, where you can go in and you're getting 20-30% discount off the stuff that if you wait to a couple of days later, then it's going to get back up to the normal price. So there's that real, that rule of sales, take it away, give somebody this opportunity to buy, but then the closing time on it, when it's going to run out, so it gives you that reason to buy, so they are in many ways assuring, their survival leading up to Christmas, before Christmas even starts, by getting as much off you as you can. And it led right into the following week. I was watching it still into the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the following Black Friday, another Black Friday where they were doing closing deals of last chance again, and that real kind of horrible sales tactic of the pressurised, you're going to lose this if you don't act upon it now. I really like that, and it's something I always keep away from. I trained in sales my business life right at the very beginning. I was blessed with a really spiritual man who was he was one of the best salesmen, probably the best window salesman in the country at the time. An incredible human being, a beautiful human being. And the reason I get involved in the Sajmark system, strangely enough, because of the sales, everything you think of sales and how it involves money and all that kind of stuff. But seeing how it all goes together and what it does to people, and the pressure that it puts on people, and how it's been sold to us in terms of get it now before it's too late. Again, it's one of the things that when you look at it and you actually see it for what it is, I refused to invest in it. I absolutely refused. It was like, no fucking way. I would rather pay more than be, used or be caught up. And because you can see the sales tactics, because you can see the intentions behind it. And sales are great if there's I remember I used to it was always like a genuine offer. And we've tried that a few times with the Vortex. Again, this is very, very different, but offering like a genuine offer, something that's real, something that if somebody, does have the desire to get in about it, then, there's an incentive, that everybody wins. It's not a trick, and it's not always remember, like, especially in the windy game, which is one of the most brutal of them all. Any business, 20% off, 30% off, 50% off, and always the question is, like, 50% off what? When I used to do sales, I was really successful when I'd my own window business. I would go out and I'd sell windows, and I would sell most of them on the first night, because I'd take the sizes, manufacturing sizes, because I was, trained in that window fitter joiner. I could take the manufacturing sizes, and then, like giving them an incentive to buy there and then. In terms of if you go ahead just now, I would never do any discounts. I would always give them my best price, and it was a kind of take it or leave it, which I lost a few because of that, but a lot of people kind of respected your honesty and your integrity, instead of going in at double the price and then they'll phone in the manager, and if you go ahead to now I'll be able to give you 50%, all that kind of bullshit. Always kept away from that, but the genuine offer was always there, with the intention to help people. I would go in, take the sizes, and then the next day, because on the company, I could basically put them into manufacture. So it did away with the the surveyor coming back out and taking the sizes. So you're saving money there, and there was all different ways that we, if you went for the best of the best of the best, the best profile and the best type of glass and all the kind of the best product that we could offer. Again, the reason for that was if people could afford it, it saved costs further down the line when parts would go wrong, or things would maybe fail on you. So if you were able to kind of safeguard the best that you could, and once you fitted it and it was done and dusted, then that was going to be it for at least a 10-year guarantee that they got at the time, then everybody wins. So at that point it makes sense for everybody to, if we're going to do the deal, then why not just do it just now? If you believe in the product and you like the product and you trust me, then let's just do it. And there would always be incentives to go down that road, so. But when you see the Black Friday stuff, and you see like how much it's shoved down your throat, and in fact the team within the Vortex on that actual Friday, there was this big push to try and get something out. And for the previous 2 days, the Thursday and the Friday, and I wasn't in the best of places at the time, it was hard going. And the situation that the text, when it finally came through, found me in terms of, look, do you fancy putting something out for Black Friday? And for the last 24, 36 hours, I've been like, just everything I thought about it was negative, in terms of the trick and the con to basically get your money off you, and to scam you into, buying stuff that you didn't need, which is mostly like Christmas is, different for the wains and all that kind of stuff. But when you get to a certain point, the amount of people that just bury themselves every single year, with the stress of Christmas, the financial strains and the hassle that goes with it. And then it comes on the back of that when the bills start to come in, the credit card bills, and the debt hits in January. It's something that I try my very, very best to avoid. So Black Friday was this is when I started, thinking about Thanksgiving, where that came from, the intention behind it, the two sides to the story, and then into Black Friday and just watching how easy it is to trick people, to trick the sheep, the consumers, to go in and just get them into that place where they feel as if they're going to lose out. And then before you know it, they're on this it starts back then, but it goes all the way through, not even to Christmas, but beyond Christmas, into the sales, So if they've not got you everything by Christmas time, by the time you get it used to be the January sales. That was a big thing, the January sales back in the day. Again, this is all before the internet, but I can remember people, you'd see it on the television, the big department stores, where people would be queuing out for Christmas Day, when the shops would close for Christmas Day, and then they'd go in and they would sleep rough on the outside the door, so they were the first people in, on Boxing Day to get these big sales, So if you could wait to after Christmas, if you had any money left after Christmas, then they were going to get you, So back then it wasn't Black Friday, it was very much the January sales that started, 26th, 27th of December, right after Christmas. So that takes into Christmas, and you know, the whole thing, and when you look at Christmas and where it came from, again, the origin of it and the time of year, it was a pagan festival in many parts of the Western world. Obviously, you know, times would have been difficult back then in terms of, you know, the kind of how difficult that time of year would be. You know, the adverse conditions, they didn't have things like central heating and, you know, the abundance of like shipped in foods and all that kind of the stuff that we take for granted now. And the winter solstice, which is the 21st, which is that'll be the shortest day. And then, you know, the whole celebration, the 12 days of Christmas, it was a celebration of the sun returning. You know, they were basically praying and celebrating that they broke its back, they got over the hump, and they were moving towards better times, sunnier days. The kind of the solstice, and then, you know, beyond that, then you're moving towards, you know, better times, back towards the sun coming up. And, you know, those 12 days and how they celebrated it in many parts of the Western world was all about, you know, excess and greed and depravity. There was, you know, things in place and people appointed in place where for those 12 days you could basically do what you wanted, you know, and we see that a lot still, you know, things like mistletoe and, you know, kissing under the mistletoe, which seems kind of harmless fun. But back then, you know, there was people put in place to make sure that you could basically do whatever you wanted at any level. And, you know, obviously you can imagine back in those times with the level of consciousness where it was, this kind of stuff that went on. And, you know, now when you look at Christmas, where we are, it's not quite like that, but in many cases it's not far away when you think of, you know, the greed and the gluttony and the excess and the amount that we eat and the amount that most people drink. And, you know, especially after working hard, you know, and the amount of carnage and stories that I've heard over the year with things like Christmas parties and people just taking it to the nth degree and ending up in situations they would never be in. You know, I remember our Christmas parties with my dad's business back in the day, and it was just an absolute plane crash. You'd be thinking who's heading for a divorce after this one, because, you know, the absolute inhibitions were lowered, and once the red wine and the beer and the bevy started to flow, then, you know, obviously you can imagine and you know where that goes to. Christmas for me and what it is, and in fact all holidays, the challenge is, you know, because we've been brainwashed into believing, and the fact that we're taught that this is Jesus' birthday, and again where that came from, that goes back probably, I think, 400 or 500 years, where the Pope at the time realised that there's nothing they could do, you know, in terms of this celebration of, you know, this pagan festival of celebrating, you know, the winter time and moving towards the sun, and everything that went with it, you know, all the deadly sins that would come with the party that took place over that festive time. And what they basically did was they tried to, you know, instead of trying to change people, instead of trying to, you know, get them away from that and stop them celebrating, because, you know, who wants to stop that? Then they started to bring in, and they made up the story of, you know, Jesus' birthday being in the 25th. And there's loads of evidence in terms of, you know, why that isn't the case and why Jesus was born in December the 25th. Which, when you learn that for the first time, especially when you grow up a Christian or a Catholic, you're like, all right, okay. What's that all about? You know, it's because you really believe it, and especially when you're young and you're going to church and you're hearing these stories about the manger and the wise men, and, you know, the kind of all that kind of, you know, the Star of Bethlehem and all that kind of good stuff, and you're like, aye, okay. And again, with all of this, when you start to question one thing, before you know it, you're questioning everything. And, you know, things like, as we believe, had a wee look on earlier on, the origin of Santa, and where he came from. You know, you think a guy climbing down your chimney into your bedroom, climbing down onto the fire, and stealing your food, which is sold as a gift, you know, sold as an offering. There was a thing way back, probably looked at this about 10, 12 years ago, and it came from, I think it was Germany, and there was this figure called Satan Claus, which is terrifying, and, you know, he had a red suit and a big beard and just a terrifying figure, and it's been taken off the internet, as have many of the things that you used to be able to enjoy when you were involved in the truther stuff back in the day. Many of the truthers have ruined that now, you know, these maniacs that bump on about what they think the truth is. Unfortunately, a lot of the good old videos have been done away with. But, you know, again, you start to question stuff, and you start to look at, you know, the origins of, you know, where does stuff come from and what's it all about. Now, I'm all about, the idea of like Christmas Day, 25th of December, and celebrating Jesus' birthday. Fantastic. Thanksgiving, giving thanks for everything you've got. Absolutely brilliant. I love all that stuff. But it's with Christmas in particular, it's the stress and the strain and the pain that comes with it, and the pressure that it puts people under. I'm at a stage just now where I refuse to get caught up in it. And we exchange gifts, and my kids are 24 and 21 now. And it's a great day and it's a great time, and my wife absolutely loves Christmas, as do I. I love the day itself. But the being aware of what you're all about, and being aware of how you celebrate it, and being aware of what you're getting caught up in, and what you're not, having the choice as to how you go through it. For me, Christmas this year, it's nothing about Jesus' birthday. Christmas this year is very much about getting time with my wife and my wains, and having some space. After a really intense year, after a very difficult year, after a brilliant year in so many different ways. For the longest time now, 25 years, this is the only time of year in my wife's business it closes. She owns a children's nursery, and it closes for 2 weeks at this time every single year. So for the last 25 years, it's the only time, no matter where we are in the world, if we're away on holiday, our phone is always on, apart from Christmas time. It's the one time of year where she gets a chance to actually stop and get a break from everything, and actually get her like fully committed. The amount of times we've been away, I've had a few horror stories, where the phone has rang, and whether it's been a member of staff off, or something's went wrong, and I experienced that a wee bit myself when I had my own business back in the day. But for her, the fact that she was on call, so having 2 weeks at Christmas time, especially on the back of this year, having time together, having the ability to be with each other, the ability to turn the phones off. I'm going to be taking a complete break from all of this work. It's caught up with me, and I am in recovery mode again. This is week 3. I've been on a holistic cleanse. Off the back of a fantastic year, and off the back of doing some great work this year, and really kind of quite proud of what we've achieved this year as a team. What's happened. It's been very different this year in terms of the biggest gains that I've witnessed. I've been with the inner circle, the ones that stand beside me, and I think of especially the spiritual progress that's been made. Most of this year, it's been very much been about the transmission that's been coming through. Started last year, the full comprehension and realisation of my connection to Babaji, my master, the Indian saint, the man who first came about back in 2001, 2002. And the man who's been there with me my whole spiritual journey, the being who I believe is the reason I'm doing this work, and the reason I'm teaching people about meditation, and doing everything I can to hopefully give people the experience of a different way of living and being, the way, the divine path, and what God actually is, what consciousness is, realising the power that's inside every single one of us. That's really been very much, maybe not all to do with him, but certainly a huge part of it. I think if I'd just been round about Wayne Dyer and the meditations I was learning, through him in my own meditation practice, which was a huge part of it as well. But without, the influence or the guidance or the transmission coming through from Babaji, then there's no way I would be where I'm at just now. And this year has been very much about that. It's been very much about, those who run about me in terms of the inner circle, getting access to that, learning about that, understanding what it is, understanding how it's happening and why it's happening, and then watching, what's been going on with them and their spiritual progress, and then how that's been feeding into so many different ways and so many different areas and so many people's lives. That when you look at it just now, and we're not quite at the end of the year, I'm probably going to do another one of these just to finish up, and to do probably a recap in the whole year in terms of what we've achieved, and the results that we've got. It's important to check in and see how you're doing, especially coming up to next year, where I believe there's going to be massive change for myself, for my family, for the Vortex, and how this, how I put this together, and how I continue to attempt to take this to the world. But this year has been very much, not as much on the public scale. We're still doing a lot of good stuff on the public side of things. But last year, previous 2024 was all about the Scottish tour and the launch of the programme, and really trying to get as many people on about it as we can. Again, thousands of people were able to gain access to it for free, whether it was in person with the Scottish tour, or whether it was the Breathe and Believe events, or whether it was online that I did. multiple times. You know, at one point it was every single week I was doing live breath work and relaxation and meditation every single week, with the desire to basically, you know, pass on a different way of living and being. You know, so all of that was great. But then this year, you know, stepping away from that, and the relaunch of the programme, and then the app coming off the back of that, and then the community and the expansion of the community and the people that are in about it, and watching the people that have left, and at the same time, you know, watching the ones that have been, you know, really doing the work and committing to the work, and the progress and the massive expansion in so many different fronts. You know, the personal development, you see that in their lives and how they're able to navigate their way through lives in all different sets of circumstances. But at the same time, you know, the spiritual side of things, which is what this is really all about. You know, there's two sides to it, but the spiritual side of it that's the main suit that we're trying to play here. That's the bit that we're trying to get everybody around about. You know, that direct, you know, remembering and reconnection back to the divinity that we carry inside of us. That's what the Vortex is. That's where it leads to. We learn the tools and the techniques and how to switch off the nervous system, and how to get, you know, quiet, and how to, you know, calm the mind and get out your head, and how to reconnect back into your heart and your feelings and your emotions. And then that internal journey, you know, back to that divine essence that we carry inside every single one of us. The bit that I discovered this year has been very much about that, about how, you know, we continue to refine that, how I continue to make it easier and easier so that anybody can get it. And we're seeing that almost every single time. The yoga barn in Glasgow, that's 6 months we've been doing the yoga barn. I'm really grateful for Maureen and Nicole for allowing us to use that space. It's been the last Friday, except the last couple, so the last Friday in every month. That's probably going to be changing into the new year. Looking at taking probably the third Friday in the month. Put that request in just now. But the group there, it's been 20 people. It's been sold out every single time, except I think the last one there was 19 there. But the experiences that we're getting, you know, the way that's evolved, the way that night has evolved, it's called the reconnection. So the reconnection back to the self, the reconnection back to the breath, the reconnection back to each other, and then at the end, the reconnection back to divinity. Saw it again on Friday night, you know, where one or two people, many of the folk in the room had already been through the process before, and there's nothing like the first time. There's nothing like coming in. There was one gentleman there in particular who had no idea. He was given it as a gift, and he was on the journey as well. He's been on the path himself, and had no idea what to expect. And you can always feel a wee bit of like, not that people are cynical, but because they don't know what it is, and then when they come in and they go through the process, always say an open heart and an open mind, that's enough, and allow the magic that's in this work, the real magic that's in this work through direct experience, to find whatever it is that needs to be, you know, unearthed or basically brought up. And when we get to the end and we start to get into that meditation, we start to, you know, remember how we're able to feel. Once you get up to things like, you know, feeling what it feels like to be joyful again, once you get up to, you know, states of unconditional love, and then the realisation, you know, the truth that is a bridge to God. Many times I've mentioned on here that when I had my first ever enlightened experience, when I came back, then that's when I understood that's why they say that God is love. Because whatever the fuck that is, that thing that we call God, sorry for swearing in the same sentence as God, apologies God, but when you understand or you experience that feeling of being in the presence of it, when you know it, and then you come back and you try to make sense of like what just happened, and what did I just go through, and then you realise that it feels the exact same, except many times more, countless times more. You know, the way that I love my wife and my Waynes and my Doug, and, you know, the inner circle, many of the people that are really close to me, with the real unconditional love, which is a frequency, you know, which is a vibration, which is a field. It's an actual literal thing, and that's the language of God. That's how we can experience and you know, get this thing that we call God. It's done through our feelings and done through our emotions. So when you have somebody go through that process, doesn't know what to expect, and then, you know, goes in there, and the breath work, you know, takes them out, you know, in terms of switches off their nervous system, you know, gets them out their head, and then the internal journey, you know, back into the heart and back into the soul, and then they get to experience things like unconditional love. And, you know, the remembering, that's what it's remembering. There's nothing to learn, it's all about remembering that power that you brought into this world, you know. And then we get to, you know, start to realise that at some point we probably gave it up, maybe it was taken from us, but it's always been there, you know. And the reconnection process back to that is the bit that makes everything better. That's what we're doing here. That's what I'm trying to do, is help people remember that divinity has always been there. You know, the bit that's you, the real you, can never die. that divine essence, the journey of the soul. Know your name. It's no Jim, it's no the man and the husband and the guy that even does this stuff. It's the bit that's inside of me, the bit that I carry in my heart and my soul, my spirit. That's the bit that's eternal. That's the bit that can never die. That's the bit that is in fact divine. So it's a part of God, and then when you go into meditation, which is the only way to get it, when you tap into it and then you start to experience, things out with, your consciousness and your awareness expands in a way where you start to realise that, you're not the centre of the universe, but you're in fact part of this unified field of infinite intelligence. And when you start to experience that and you start to realise that the barriers that would be placed within ourselves, that we place within each other, once the barriers come down, we start to understand that we are all connected at a certain level, and through the power of awareness and quantum shifts in consciousness, then you get to experience that, and that is the way that we fix the world. That's the way that we change things and get it back to the way that it's meant to be. And that journey for me is ongoing. It's fascinating to watch it. It's really, really simple. But it's no easy, and to really get it to the nth degree in terms of what's available to you, it takes work, and this year within the programme, much less of my emphasis has been on the general public. Last year it was all about because you think this is so powerful, and it literally saves lives, and it does away with and transcends addiction, and it does away with traumas, stuff that can't be fixed, whether it's sexual abuse or whether it's PTSD, whatever it is that people have been through, what we find, what we see time and time again, once you have a shift in consciousness, once you have the ability to go in, excuse me, and remember, the power that's inside you, and then the realisation that power is inside every single one of us. When you start hearing about that and your life changes in every single way in ways you can't even imagine, at that point you'd be a fool to think that, all right, this is great. Surely everybody's going to want this. And unfortunately that's not the case, but because of one reason or another, and that's something that I'm continuously trying to work out, how we not try to give it to people, but how I make it available so that for those that are ready, so that there's an easy bridge, to find their way into it, and the breath is the bridge, well-being is the bridge, bringing people in. Again, I'm almost going back to the way it was before, where no tricking people, but the stepping stone is well-being. The stepping stone is for people that are suffering, for people that are in adversity, for people that are going through challenges, which has been my whole life. My whole journey it's not been easy, but the stuff that I've learned along the way, the stuff that I've picked up, the stuff that I now teach, publicly since the Vortex opened in 2016, 17, the things that I've been passing on and the experiences that people are getting, then it doesn't matter what you come in with. It doesn't matter, where you've been or what you've been through, the pain, the suffering, the decimation, whatever it is. Then when you reconnect and you remember, when you tap back into that innate power that you carry inside of you, and it's inside every single one of us, we come in with it. We come in from the field, we come in from the divine, we come in from consciousness. The soul, locates into the body, the spirit's infused, and life is born. And for the minute, we're almost born, whether it's the school system, whether it's the early traumas, whether it's the heartbreak or the heartache, then we're separated from it. And for many, many people, almost everyone, then that's your entire life. You go through your life in absolute ignorance, and ignorance just means we don't know. And that's our greatest sin. That's the big thing that needs to change. We need to do away with ignorance, and the way to change ignorance is through education, and then given the experience through awareness. So when you expand your awareness and you get to experience different things, and you get to see things in a different way, you start to realise that there's perhaps, in fact, definitely, different truths to what you've been taught. Things like Thanksgiving and things like Christmas and what it actually means. You get to see that that's part of the circus. You get to see that that's part of the illusion that we're living in, this never-ending figure eight, literal jungle circus zoo of keeping you busy, keeping you entertained, keeping you consuming. And you look at the world and where it's at, and obviously it isn't working. And really now, when you see the world in the way that it is, what's going on in the Western world and how things just continue to escalate, then that way of living and being, it's going to break down at some point, especially the whole capitalism model, the usury system of debt, and when you see the amount of debt that you look at the Western world, you look at America and the debt that America's in, you look at the worldwide, the debt and how much money's owed, and all the different ways you can see the debt. There's a debt debt calculator. You can see it online. And you look at the federal debt, and you look at all the different types of debt, and it's fascinating just watching it accumulate in real time, and how that can never be repaid. So that entire system is in free fall just now. It's coming down. That's probably the reason they're bringing in this digital currency, so they can do away, with the cash-based system, and obviously everything that comes with that, in terms of traceability and tracking and. Your freedoms that you thought that you had. I was in the supermarket yesterday, Saturday afternoon, what day is this, Monday afternoon, try again. It was Sunday afternoon, and the place was mobbed, 2:30 on a Sunday afternoon, and there's 2 wee juniors on the checkout. There was 3 people in front of me, and it's obviously moving towards cashless. You scan yourself. And the worry for me is, as I say to people on the till, that I'd word with the manager and say, as if Tesco aren't making enough money, would it really hurt? And I was fine. I was in a great mood. I was in such a good place. So I had an opportunity. There was a couple of wee old women that stole my space in the queue. I went to speak to the manager to see if there's any way he could open up another checkout, because there was probably 10 people with heavy, full baskets waiting to get through. And when I went back, this pair of old women, and they're probably in their 80s, had nicked my space in the queue, and I called them out on it. I gave them a wee bit of it, and they didn't like it, but it was funny. It was with a bit of a laugh and a giggle, and I met another couple of people who I let go in front of me again, and they were kind of winding me up because I was getting further and further back in the queue. But just watching some people, the stress they were under, especially older people. They don't want to scan their own food. Surely the money you're paying Tesco's or any of these big supermarkets, there must be enough profit in that for them to pay somebody, to do the job that they're meant to be doing. I never went to supermarket school. I don't want to scan my own food. I don't mind paying an extra, whatever it is, couple of quid for somebody to do that. You see the literal billions that these companies are making, selling 99% literal shite and poison. The truth be told, when you look at now, even Tesco's and Lanark, there's probably only 4 or 5 organic, and they say organic, whether it even is organic, produce, then it's that whole model is a big part of the system that doesn't work. So the change is on. The pain and suffering that's been experienced just now worldwide. Just the other day, they shootings that took place over in Australia, Bondi Beach. The fear, I'm certainly feeling a lot of fear just now, which is not healthy. When you look at the radicalisation and the possibility of spiritual warfare, religion, the politics, the role that politics is playing in it, the role that greed, with the governments, there's a and I've been watching this for the longest time now. One of my biggest fears is war, because that's the ultimate suppressor. That's how they do away with the next generation coming up. I hear my dad talking about it when his dad come back for the war, and the amount of families that basically then grew up, without dads, and the roles that the mothers had to play, and how. And even the guys that made it back through war, and the women that went through the war, what they were left with, in terms of how their coping mechanisms. And this is something that's still ongoing just now. You hear about it and you see it all the time in this country, even more so probably in America because of the wars that they've been in. Always, and people coming back sold an illusion, especially after 9/11, the war on terror. And then at the time I remember thinking, no, for this, there's a move on. Even when I knew nothing about this, just didn't feel right. Princess Diana was another one. When you see stuff happen, just at the time you feel something just isn't quite right. And then you watch, the amount of people that signed up for that to go and fight the Taliban and do away with what's his name, Bin Laden or Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. And what they did to these countries with regime changes. And when you look at it down, you boil it back, and there's enough evidence now and information to realise that every single one of them was to do with one or two things. Greed, money, power, natural resources, normally oil, or, whether it's, electricity, natural gas, that kind of stuff. And you see, what these countries are prepared to do. And the killing and the decimation and the literal genocide, as happened with the Native Americans, with the American people back in the day, over 100 million. And you think, that's only 400 years ago. And how does nobody know about it? And then you look what's happening in the world just now, in the Middle East, and what's happening, in recent times, all over Africa and so many different parts of the world, where, normally America goes in, certainly the last 50, 60 years where America were growing since the end of the Second World War. Again, the war to end all wars. When you look at how that started and who benefited from that, the money that was made, by different businesses supplying both sides, and then, the suppression that comes with that and the decimation that comes with that, and how, how long does it take for us to then rise up again and stand up again? Then we're sold another lie. I've been back into where we find ourselves just now, really deep in this debt-based system that you can never get there. Mortgages that you've got forever, the price of inflation, the cost of living, basic necessities, where many people just now, and now in 2025, whether they choose to either eat or whether they choose to heat their home, and you can't do both. A lot of these people, a lot of these pensioners, they served or went through, some of them the very tail end of the wars, they've been through it, and a lot of them are ex-military where they've went and they've lost parts of their body, many of them have lost parts of their mind, so many have lost parts of their heart and parts of their soul because of what they witnessed and what they experienced, the amount of suicides of people coming back, and then they're basically chucked to the side and left to get fucking on with it. So that entire business, that entire machine, that war machine, the industrial, that whole complex organisation of military weapons and who benefits from it, and then the decimation that takes place. You just need to look at the Middle East just now, and watching. I watched a wee video this morning, and absolutely, they were given, and paying full respects to what happened down in Australia. But at the same time, they're writing between 20 and 30 people every single day still. Even just a couple of days ago, there was 2 young boys that were basically shot over in Palestine because they crossed this invisible line that Israel is basically, you talk about genocide, and you talk about, what's happening in the world, and it's that's just the other day and nobody knows anything about it. And that's happening every single day, but it's been normalised. And then at the same time, when something happens, to the West, but it's no use to being seen, then, then it goes in a way that, it's tragic, the whole thing. War is hell, it's absolute hell, and more war and more fighting, and, this idea that we can, try and suppress a people or suppress nations by obliterating them, and hoping that just everyone's going to get back to normal and we're going to get back to peace in that way. That's an illusion, that can't happen. And at the same time, this is where the biggest frustration really is, because the antidote to all of that is this. Spirituality, religion and politics are the biggest challenge we face, because they're all about separation, they're all about keeping you fighting, they're all about picking a side. You look at America just now, how America is not already in civil war, and that must be coming, because people are so far down the road now, whether it's red or blue, it doesn't matter where you're at, and how divisive the whole thing is to keep us fighting and to keep us separated. That's why I call it the separation game, and this is the antidote to that. This is all about unity, this is all about union. This is why spirituality is all about unification. It's about being together as one, under one God. Now, there's many different prophets and many different saints and many different incredible evolved beings that all knew what God was. But it's amazing what they take. Even when you look at what's happened to the Bible, you look at what happened to Jesus, the great quote that I use, and I don't know where it came from, but what it basically says is that Jesus Christ, he and his disciples were followers of the way, which means he knew what God was. He knew what God was, and he understood that the power of God and the kingdom of the divine was inside him. And he also said that what he was able to do, any single one of us, which means that the power that was inside Jesus Christ was inside everybody else. That's what he was teaching. And then fast forward to where we're at just now, and then the Bible comes through, and you think about what the Catholic Church has done to the world. Every single time I see a church, especially when you're abroad and you see some of these cathedrals and you go inside them, and the amount of gold and jewels and decoration, and my heart sinks. I refuse to go into them anymore, because you walk in and the first thing you think is who had to die for this in the name of God? Bringing people in as the English did, as the British have done when they went to America as well. It was very much, you need to honour our God and worship our God, or else we do away with you. And obviously that's not the way of God, that's not the way that it's meant to be. So spirituality is the way. Spirituality is all about, being together, unification, in harmony, in coherence with the way, the great way, the divine path, in harmony with Mother Nature, in coherence with your own true nature, in coherence with yourself. And that's why just now there are so many people in disease, so many people are getting sick, so many people are so far away from how it's meant to be. And neither wonder we're struggling, so very difficult times. It's, I feel it, I see it every single day. We tend to ourselves, which is the only thing that's your starter for tennis, to tend to yourself first and foremost, to get it for yourself. This is week number 3 for me. Just come off the back of having another bug. Very much, I would bet my life on it that it's man-made, how dirty it felt in my system. At one point, my oxygen saturation was down to about 87, 88%, which when you look up Google, I've never recommended anybody to do that, but with my oxygen advantage training, I knew that it was dangerous. I could hardly breathe. I felt like I was drowning. And that was me with doing functional breathing and generating nitric oxide and, doing I'm doing breathwork exercises every single day. Had a cold for about a week, and then 6 days in, then bang, straight into my upper respiratory, into my chest. And then for nearly 3 days I'm in bed. And at many points there, really, really worried because I felt like I was drowning. Because I couldn't get a breath. And then you stick a wee pulse oximeter on my finger. When it gets to 87, 88%, there's a danger of your vital organs starting to shut down. And then what do? Do you go to the hospital? And then what do? They say you've got COVID and want to fire, some of that into you. And it's like, nah, I'll take my chances, And then meditation, reconnection back into the source, bringing your attention and focusing on well-being and focusing on the way you would like to be as opposed to where you are. I've experienced a couple of literal miracles. One wee healing session my wife did when I was lying on the healing bed, and she put her hands on me, and I was really struggling. I was worried, struggling, because my mum died of COVID. I watched my mum, her lungs literally whited out inside one night, and she never recovered, into a coma, and basically drowned. That's how it got her. That was before COVID was even a thing, just weeks before it broke onto the mainstream. So I'm lying, on this healing bed, just feeling like, please don't fucking drown. Doing everything I can to, and making all sorts of promises in terms of how I was going to live when I come back for it. And then inside 20 minutes, a wee bit of intention from my wife, a wee bit of love into me. I was able to let go and stop worrying. And I felt this like a light vibration, like a literal light, like a vibration in my chest and upper respiratory. And when I came to, probably half an hour later, stuck the pulse oximeter on my finger, and it jumped up to 92 or 93%, which is to go from your vital organs might be shutting down straight to, everyone's going to be fine. And then every single day since then, I've been getting stronger and stronger. It's up to 98% now, but over the last 3 weeks I've really changed. Again, all processed food's gone. I'm not quite full God at the minute, but the spiritual experiences are coming through, and I'm starting to get back into alignment again. I'm starting to, because I've had to, because of the pain and suffering that I was going through on many different fronts after a really kind of an intense year. Again, it caught me out, it got me again. You think I would learn, but that desire to help people, that desire to serve people, it reaches a point where it seems to burn me out, and the older I'm getting, then I'm going to have to learn a different way of doing things. And that's certainly my intentions for next year. There's some massive changes coming, which I'm excited about. I need to pace myself a wee bit more, as I continuously seem to say. But it's getting to the point now, where I need to change up the way that I'm doing things. So I'm going to be here for as long as I can, and pass on these tools and techniques and this way of living and being to as many people as I can. And that's been a big part of this year in terms of the inner circle. The word apprentice is something that I don't really like using. I see people that are standing beside me as pillars, as like custodians of this work, people that know what it's all about. Now, some of them have had the last 2 or 3 years every single day. We have had meditations every single day in the sacred space meditation. So I was in there at 4:30, 4:45 this morning. I think it was 5 people sitting in silence in meditation before their day starts. When you see the notifications that come through on the emails, I think it was 2:30, and then 2:45 the first 2 were in, so people getting called out of bed and sitting in silence, tapping into the field of consciousness, tapping into the divine mind, letting go of their own problems, like stopping the worry and stopping the fears. That many times that's what gets you up out of your bed. But the byproduct of that, the fuel for your fire, when you know how this goes together, and you're able to go and to sit and to breathe, to calm the nervous system down, to get out your head and stop fucking worrying, and then to reconnect back into the heart and back into the soul, and then through the power of awareness and the power of intention, then you get to know, what you're surrounded by. To think that you're sitting in this field of consciousness right here, right now, and the only thing you need to do is to basically stop being you and to allow it in, and then the power that brings, the good that brings, the kind of the knowing, the knowing and the truth that brings, that everything's going to be okay, that the divine, the will of God, I'm thinking a lot about just now. I've been constantly for the last couple of months just being like, almost like a mantra, the will of God. When you look at the world and you even the adversity that we've been facing, the will of God, everyone's going to be fine. Having faith and knowing, and then tapping into it, tapping into that field, which is, again, science is documenting this now. I've been watching a load of Joe Dispenza again. He seems to come in waves in my life. There's over 800, I think there's 817 or 820 testimonials of people who have been through all sorts of stuff. Some of the most chronic diseases, some of like health conditions and diagnoses, stage 4 cancers on every level. And when you watch these people, very difficult to not cry for me when I watch them. One, because of the truth that's in them, but one, when you see what they've been through, and you see what Western medicine a lot of the times has done to them. A lot of these people have been through all sorts of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and almost lost their life because of that. And they reach that dark night of the soul where there's no way forward and there's nothing else they can do, and many of them are basically told to go home and die, and then as if by magic or in some sort of miracle they'll come across Joe Dispenza, and very, very quickly they learn how to meditate, and they learn a different way of thinking and being and switching off their head, and the testimonials, somebody that's been through it before them saying, aye, this is where I was and this is what I did. And then you watch these people learn to meditate and tap into this field of consciousness, and then all of a sudden the tumour seems to shrink. It doesn't seem to shrink, it shrinks, and then many times, and more often than not, the cancer disappears and they get their life back. And then the person that's on the other side of that, with this second chance, you talk about the joy to be alive, and you talk about when you've almost lost everything and you get that second chance. That's what happened to me. I got a second chance. That process that basically pulled me out of that hole of despair, of hopelessness, decimation, like real depression and low-level consciousness, like suicidal, a place you wouldn't wish on anybody. And then you get a second chance and somebody enables you to feel the light, and then you step into the light and you remember what it's all about, and you remember what you're all about, and you go on this intentional journey. To think this is almost my 29th year of working on this stuff, of working on myself, and the journey that's came before this up to this point, and then now my continued desire, every single day to continue learning, evolving, paying it forward, finding new ways that I can make it easier and easier for people to get on about it. Why? Because it's going to be needed. Of course it is. The challenge we face in this world just now, we've never been at this place before. It's a crossroads for humanity. That's the way that I see it. The fight is on for your soul, literally in some cases. When you look at AI and all the kind of madness in terms of the stuff they're trying to put into your body and how many people are going to line up for that. This whole is it transhuman? Basically you're not quite, you're not a human being anymore. You're basically there's an interface, or there's a you're joined up with artificial intelligence, and at that point you stop becoming human. You've lost your consciousness. You've lost that divine consciousness that you brought into this world. Yeah, and it doesn't matter how bright these these quantum computers are. They can't make an eyeball. They can't experience free will the way that we do. They don't have the abilities that we have as human beings. And that's something, again, because of the adversity we're facing. People like Greg Braden are talking a lot about that just now. What it really means to be a human being, like a full, true human. So exciting times in many ways. Also terrifying in others. For me, leading into these holy days, the reason that holy days came up was because I realised the other day, that Christmas and the feelings and what you would perceive Christmas to be in terms of how you feel in that day, free space, all the toys, all the prezzies, the abundance of food, the ability and the space to enjoy the ones that you love the most. I had the realisation in meditation day before yesterday that I'm experiencing Christmas every single day, because every single day is a holy day for me. It starts on my knees, and I pray to God. I sit in meditation, and my intention is to connect to the divine. And every single day it finishes the same way. I leave the day behind and I give thanks to the divine. I give thanks to that divine essence that I carry inside of me. The joy to be alive is something I am very aware of. And that just doesn't happen morning and night. I'm carrying it with me at all times. And the desire is to make this world a better place. The desire is to bring in the light into the darkness, for those that are suffering, those that are trapped in ignorance, those that are lost, for whatever reason. Then they need to know that there is a different way of doing it. And through great pain and suffering, through that contrast and adversity, then that's normally the way that people find this work. And that's where, I'm always preparing for anybody that wants to get on about it, so that every single day can be a holy day and you can experience, what you're meant to get when you come here. This should be heaven and earth. It should be, and it's not. And there's very specific reasons as to why it's not, and that's something we need to change. So as always, for the greatest good always, for all that is divine, I'm hoping to do another one before Christmas, maybe between Christmas and New Year, to finish the year up, to do a wee recap on the year, to give thanks for everything that's came through this year, and then to be excited for what's coming in the year ahead. But for now, to celebrate the holy days, to realise that divinity, that divine power that you carry inside you, and to live from that place, to get it for yourself first, and then if you can, to bring it into the world, because by fuck doesn't need it. Sending love, sending light, peace out, God bless, take it easy, and bye for now.